Today we're discussing the latest NHL trade rumors around the Ottawa Senators, Vancouver Canucks, and Philadelphia Flyers. We have a lot more waiver news, including a few claims and several more players on the waiver wire. Plus we have a new mascot in Seattle, big news out of Winnipeg regarding an unveiled statue, and lots of other news regarding NHL players being cut out of training camp, sent back to junior, and signed. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a ton of news here today. Let's get started right away with the NHL waiver news. There's lots more players on waivers, not nearly to the point of yesterday. There was over 40 players yesterday, which we did have a couple of claims, but we do have another fairly large group here today. The waiver claims are as follows. The Calgary Flames have claimed Radim Zohorna from Pittsburgh. He's a huge guy. I think he's 6'6". So Calgary's certainly looking to add a little extra beef, a little extra depth. So they claim him from the Penguins. And Ottawa claims goaltender Magnus Hellberg from the Seattle Kraken, who's 31. It's been a real solid goalie over in Europe playing the KHL. Has very limited NHL exposure experience, but the news from Ottawa claiming a goaltender came off the other news that came out of Ottawa today, that I guess, I don't know if you want to call him the starter, but certainly the main goaltender, Cam Talbot, is going to be out for, there's different reports. Some say 5 to 7 weeks, or some say it could be as much as maybe 4 weeks. And it's all due to a fractured rib. Now, certainly that's an uncomfortable injury. He's already been dealing with the injury for, I think it's like 4 or 5 days. He's been considered day to day. And now they're saying he's going to need obviously more time after a little further evaluation. They uncovered what the issue was. Of course, we're still like around 10, 11 days, I think it is, before they play their first regular season NHL game. So you factor that in. Plus, he's already been dealing with it for 4 or 5 days. So that's about a 2-week time frame right there. So you're likely looking at missing, I would say, anywhere from 3, it could be longer, but at least 3 weeks of the regular season, possibly 4 to 5. It just really depends. Some of these injuries are difficult to say. Now, fortunately, in the first month of the season, Ottawa doesn't have any back-to-back, so hopefully goalie Anton Forsberg's up for the challenge and can play the bulk of the time. Hellberg probably will have to see at least a couple of games in there, but they can play Forsberg a lot and give him more of a rest once Talbot returns. Hopefully when Talbot does get back, he can run with it for a little while and kind of offset the playing time some, but certainly not great news for a team in Ottawa that's desperate for a really good start to the season. Last year, they sunk their playoff hopes in October. They said you can't win the cup in October, but you can kill your playoff chances in October. And this team needs to get off out of the gates at a good start. I'm sure there's pressure on the coach after all the changes. And we'll see. That's not going to help matters, but hopefully they'll be okay getting through that. They're certainly not the only team in their division dealing with injuries. Now, as far as new players on waivers, we have several more. As I mentioned, the Lightning have placed forwards Jamel Smith and Alex Barré-Boulet on waivers. The Anaheim Ducks have defenseman Olli Juolevi, Justin Kirkland, and Chase DeLeo. The Columbus Blue Jackets have Gavin Bayreuther and Trey Fix-Wolansky. The LA Kings have Thomas Tynan. The Winnipeg Jets have forward Kevin Stenlund. And the Minnesota Wild have defenseman Joe Hicketts and Joseph Cramarosa. So a bunch more. I'm not sure we'll see any more claims today out of those players, but we'll see. Still going to be plenty more players going through the waiver process here over the course of the week as NHL rosters are trimmed down and they get down to their actual NHL opening night rosters. Now, on to some other news. As we mentioned, a couple of items. These there could have been talked about in the last couple of days, but we didn't get them into a video. So the Winnipeg Jets, as we knew, had planned to unveil a statue honoring longtime captain and one of the greatest players in, well, if not the greatest player in their history, as long as, one of the greater players in NHL history, Hockey Hall of Famer Dale Hawerchuk. Certainly well honored with a statue. I'll show you a picture of the statue here. Certainly turned out really well. If you do a Google search of Hawerchuk, you'll see there's a pretty common photo that they used to make the statue from. Certainly was very well received. The Hawerchuk family, I'm sure, was quite appreciative of this. But Hawerchuk had a long-lasting impression in the city of Winnipeg. He's impacted so many people in the game of hockey. Was really a great family man, and had a major impact on a lot of players during his time coaching in junior as well, including one of the top players on the Jets, Mark Scheifele. I know Scheifele had Hawerchuk as his junior coach and had a major impact on him, and he was one of those guys. It's just the world lost way too soon. He was giving back so much to the game of hockey with the work he was doing in junior, and eventually could have made it back to the NHL if he would have chosen to. I think he decided to stay in junior because he just really loved working with kids that age, but certainly the Hawerchuk statue turned out fantastic. Nice to see in Winnipeg. And as I mentioned as well, we have a new mascot. The Seattle Kraken, of course, in their inaugural season, did not have a mascot. And now they do, which has been unveiled. I'll show you a picture here in case you haven't seen it. The mascot's name is Bowie. Obviously, you can tell by looking at it, it's a troll. I'd like to know what everybody's thoughts are on this. I know when we've seen new mascots in the past, like for example, when the Flyers first brought out Gritty, I was very skeptical. I wasn't sure. I thought it was kind of dumb, but it didn't take long for Gritty to kind of wear on me and to become a likable character. And now I would make an argument that Gritty might be the greatest mascot in the game, perhaps, or at least one of them for sure. I don't know. That's at least my thought. But at first glance, it's I don't know. I mean, the color scheme, it kind of makes sense. I don't know what to think of Bowie. I guess time will tell. But I'd like to know what everybody thinks. So drop a comment down below. Let me know what you think of this new mascot. I know some were saying, well, there was a team name like Kraken. Why wouldn't they have a Kraken, which is basically like a sea monster? But it's like, well, the other thing you got to remember here is a lot of mascots, especially for teams that have a name that's kind of like supposed to be like a scary animal or something to that effect, intimidating. They're not going to go that route because they want the mascot to be very interactive with children and kids at the games and stuff, so they're not going to be too scary. They want to be lovable, likable, that kind of stuff. So I don't know. Overall, I'm not really sure what to think here, what to feel, but certainly could have done a worse job, that's for sure. I know there seems to be quite a mixed review out there so far, but let me know down in the comments what you think of the Kraken mascot Bowie. Now on to some other news. We got some injury fronts. The Bruins are already beaten up going into the regular season. They can add to that now. Taylor Hall is going to be out for at least a week. He's listed as week to week, so it very well could drag on. And it's expected he's probably going to miss at least the first little bit of the regular season. So as I mentioned, as we know, Marchand, McAvoy, and Grzelcyk will not be there to start the season because they're still recovering from off-season surgeries. I think the earliest we'll see anybody will be November. It's probably going to be into December to January for McAvoy. Grzelcyk and Marchand, I think, will be back a little bit sooner, depending on how things go once they get more doing more on ice stuff. But to add another injury to the mix here with Taylor Hall, that's not good. So obviously they're going to have a top six that's missing their top two left wingers, which is not what they were hoping for. Like I mentioned before, these other teams like Ottawa, Detroit, Buffalo, who feel like they've improved a lot and can compete for a playoff spot. I don't know. If the Bruins, start slow because of all the injuries, they're going to have to make sure they don't to take advantage of this because this is not something that you really see a lot. But the Bruins certainly starting shorthanded, and you got to wonder how that's going to go. Jaromir Jagr, a longtime NHL forward, obviously, right up there at a lot of the all-time list. Jagr's still been playing over in Europe for the team he owns over in the Czech Republic in Kladno, and apparently now he's actually seriously considering retirement. I seen an article where he was interviewed saying that he seems to be losing his passion to play. He just doesn't have it in him anymore. So after all these years, it looks like it might finally actually become official. So we'll see on that. Now, we already talked about waiver wire claims and players going through that process, but there have been some other notable players been reassigned, including the Chicago Blackhawks sending 2022 first rounder Kevin Korchinski back to junior. The Arizona Coyotes have demoted defenseman Victor Soderstrom as well. To me, he was a pretty high first round pick. It's going on a few years now, and it's a little concerning that he still doesn't have a regular spot on a not very strong team. So that could have very well been a wasted pick. A little early to say he's a draft bust, but we're kind of approaching those territories when he's played such a limited amount of NHL games on a team that's not overly strong. So we'll see what the future holds for him. But he's starting in the minors, and the Anaheim Ducks have also demoted a former first rounder, Benoit Olivier Groulx. He goes to the AHL. to start the season as well. On some signings that were announced, the New Jersey Devils had Zach Senyshyn there in the PTO. He does get a contract, but he won't be playing in the NHL. He's getting an AHL-only contract, not even a two-way deal. So Senyshyn will play for Utica. So that's signed, sealed, and delivered. The Columbus Blue Jackets have decided to move on and release James Neal, the real deal, from his PTO. So he will not be getting a deal in Columbus. So the real deal, no deal for him, which a little surprising, to be honest. I know James Neal just seems like no matter where he goes, they go to the playoffs, even if he doesn't have a lot of the impact himself and because of his play in recent years. But like, I think he's got a ridiculous streak of consecutive years in the playoffs or something. So I don't know. I thought that even though the Columbus Blue Jackets have made some improvements, that they might not be deep enough that he might have a chance there, but certainly not impressive enough to get their attention for a contract. The Seattle Kraken will have made good on one of their PTOs. That's Daniel Sprong. He gets a one-year deal, but it's a two-way contract. He gets $750 at the NHL, $325 at the AHL. So no guarantee he plays NHL games, but I'm sure he'll at least get some for sure. And the New Jersey Devils have also released Thomas Hickey from his PTO, so he cannot make good on that offer in training camp with New Jersey. Now on to the trade section and rumor of the video. Obviously, a lot of today's information comes from Frank Saravalli. Rumor has it that the Vancouver Canucks have been trying to actively move the contract of Michael Ferland, who's of course never going to likely play again on long-term injured reserve. We know that the Canucks have made it a mission and a high priority to find some cap space. Obviously, getting out of LTIR would be helpful to that. I'm surprised we haven't seen other moves, but certainly I guess we'll have to wait and see. But they have been actively trying to get that contract, so obviously teams that would be willing to possibly take that would be ones that have lots of cap space. If anybody's struggling to get to the cap floor, for example. So you're looking at your Chicagos, maybe Arizona for the right price, things like that. And they're obviously going to want some sort of incentive to do it, which is probably why they haven't made a deal yet, as they likely haven't found somebody willing to take it for the right price. Now, also in Vancouver, some updates on the Bo Horvat contract extension negotiation. I know Elliotte Friedman was talking about the fact that he and his agent are likely using a Sean Couturier contract as a comparable, which is I think $7.75 or $7.7 something million per year. I'm not sure he's really going to get that much money, but it should be around $7 or a little bit above $7 million. Of course, Sean Couturier has a Selke trophy to his name, is regarded as one of the better two-way players of the game. So is Bo, but not quite to that level. So I think it's fair to say he won't get the same money that Couturier did, but it should be getting closer to that, which a lot of people might have a hard time understanding. But he's put up some good offensive numbers, real solid two-way centerman. $7 million bucks, might be difficult looking at their cap situation, but that would be roughly what he'd be worth on the open market. If he hits free agency and doesn't get extended, that's probably what he's going to get. He'll probably get a 7-year deal, somewhere around $7 million or a little bit better. That's what the going rate will be for Bo Horvat. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. Of course, that Miller extension just might end up boxing him out, but at the same time, I think the preference would be to keep Bo and move some other money out, but that might be challenging. Like this current regime in Vancouver has inherited a very bad cap situation and some unfavorable contracts on that roster, and I know they'd like to move some of them, but it's proven to be challenging and expensive. So we'll see where things go on that front. The Pittsburgh Penguins are actively shopping the young defenseman Pierre-Olivier Joseph. At this point, as I mentioned before, Pittsburgh has more than enough NHL quality defensemen, or at least one-way deal contracts. And at this point, they're going to have to likely put somebody through waivers if they can't trade them. And that's going to likely, put them in a predicament where they could lose somebody for nothing, which they don't really want to do. But Joseph might not be able to find himself a regular spot. I think he's earned an NHL opportunity, but it sounds to me like Joseph doesn't really have a future within their, at least immediate future within their top six in Pittsburgh. Of course, they made some other moves this year. I think the blue line's a little bit deeper, and it's not looking like things are going to work out for him there. So they are trying to find a new home rather than lose him or somebody else on waivers. So lots of teams are always looking for defensive help. So stay tuned. Look out for Pittsburgh. They will be in that mix. And the Philadelphia Flyers are another team to watch this year. Some reports from between Saravalli and Friedman talking about Travis Sanheim. Now, of course, this is not a deal we're going to be anytime soon. I know Flyers fans, I've seen them talking about this since the comments were made saying that, it doesn't make sense. They extended Ristolainen to play with Sanheim. Why wouldn't they extend him too? And they might, but at the same time, a lot of people expect the Flyers to have a real tough season this year. He's on an expiring contract. He has good value. Teams would covet a player like him. The return package might just be too good to pass up. And to be honest, they could elevate one of their other young D to take over for him if they do that. If the Flyers are going to have to go through some tough times to rebuild things here, it might be best for him to move on. No guarantee that he's traded. I mean, they could extend him. But at this point, if we get a slow start to the Flyers season, and, there might not be a lot of appetite there to make that deal happen, and it might be the end of Sanheim's time in Philly. So we'll have to wait and watch that scenario. It's nothing that I would expect to happen right away. I mean, anything's possible, but it sounds like it would be more like a trade deadline thing if he does end up getting moved. But I wouldn't rule out an extension. It just doesn't always make sense with the direction of this team and where things are going right now. And Frank Seravalli is also reporting on Jakob Chychrun that the Ottawa Senators are still absolutely, by far, he says, the team pushing the hardest to acquire defenseman Jakob Chychrun. Chychrun, of course, has not taken the ice as of yet, still recovering from injuries, which is, I think, part of why we haven't seen a trade. I think part of it's also the negotiations, but I don't think we're going to see a trade. I'd be surprised until he's actually been able to be cleared medically and actually get some ice time in. But obviously, at this point, there's reports from Darren Dreger as well talking about the Chychrun and Ottawa situation that the Coyotes have perked up and kind of taken interest on young goalie Matt Sogard, so there's interest there. There was previous reports about Shane Pinto. There are some that feel that the price tag might be changing a bit, and maybe they're willing to obviously take a little bit of a smaller package. There's also some wondering if Erik Brannstrom's preseason play, who's actually been quite good so far, he's had a couple of really good games for Ottawa, if maybe they'd taken notice of him and maybe he might be a player that they might be willing to put in the package, because it's been rumored that they might be trying to push like a first-round pick and maybe like a second-round pick, and then maybe like one prospect, and that prospect could be like, maybe Lassie Thompson or Jarventi or Sokolov or one of those guys. None of the guys that are considered like your blue-chip guys, like not trading Jake Sanderson. They really don't want to move Shane Pinto. I mean, I've seen the reports before we talked about that Pinto was a guy that the Coyotes coveted, and I don't blame them. He's an excellent player, but to me, he might even outplay some of the other guys to work his way to the top six eventually. So I'm not sure that Pinto was somebody they really want to move on from. And then, like I said, Brannstrom's a player that I think a lot of the fan base and a lot of the people in the organization are still not 100% on. They're still like, he's had a good preseason, but he's not consistent. But if he's gotten their attention, maybe he could end up being that player for them, because he is a pretty dynamic skater, good passer. His issues tend to stem more from his own end. So we'll see where things go. But, there's no doubt, based on what we're hearing from Frank Seravalli, that Ottawa continues to push to try to get this defenseman. But I think it's going to be a little while before we see a deal, and no guarantee that it ends up being Ottawa. We had talked before how Columbus was pushing too, and that he might be open to going there, just given the changes that they've made recently as well. But it's certainly going to be an interesting next couple of weeks. I wonder if the Coyotes, with him being more public about his thoughts and wishes to be moved, might feel a little bit more pressure and want to get that deal done before the season starts. Time will tell. We'll see. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed today down in the comments. We'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.